Hi, this is Ed Lazarus, President of the Shoreline Chamber of Commerce, and welcome to the Chamber Connection. Today's show is all about wine and wine tasting, and to help me with this discussion, I'm joined by Steve Kay from Ballou's Wine Bar and Restaurant. Steve, welcome to the Shoreline Connection.
Ed, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you for being here, and first, before we get started, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Steve Kay, as you already said. My wife, Deb, and I own Ballou's Restaurant and Wine Bar in Guilford. We opened this up in around 2009. It was a venture at the time where our 401k was starting to deplete. We wanted to try to put it to good use and maybe increase our 401k in a different manner, per se. So we decided to look into something that we could get back into. I was in restaurants for about 30 years. I left for about 10 years, went into the corporate world, then kind of had enough of it. And my wife said to me one day, "Well, why don't we open back up a restaurant of our own?"
Really, just like that?
Yeah, it was kind of like that.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. That takes a bit of courage to do that.
In the time, but you really don't think about it in that way. You just kind of look forward and try to find something that you think you can improve on or take into a direction that's not around. It's kind of how the whole wine bar came about. We were impressed as we traveled for our 30th anniversary, dating myself a little bit.
Dating yourself, indeed, yes.
And we went to London and France, and we were really amazed at how the pubs and bars were set up there in the family style. You could go in, you could get a glass of wine. You really didn't feel intimidated or pressured. The price structure was much different than what was really in the States at that time as well. Having 4 children, and all of them grown and in school and beyond, college I mean, we were looking for a place that, you could go with your 22, 23, 30-year-old kids, sit down, have a great glass of wine, nice food, and a conversation.
So when you started this venture, we were talking before, but when you started this venture, the whole wine experience was something that was new to you?
It was new in this capacity. Deb and I, we started to kayak. And when we kayaked, we made sure we kayaked near wineries. So we'd finish up and we'd go hit a winery and start teaching ourselves about wine. Then my son found a place in Westchester, New York, to take a wine seminar. So we decided to do that while we were already in the process of opening up Guilford, Ballou's. And it was a great experience. We learned a ton. In fact, we learned so much we could probably open up a vineyard.
Really? Really?
Yeah, that's how intense
kidding.
this class was.
Wow.
But we needed to tailor it down. We didn't have the time to really commit to it, although we did learn a lot. And it helped us to make the right choices and give us a direction we wanted to take Ballou's. Nobody has the depth of wine that we have. You can go to a lot of businesses, a lot of restaurants. I'll have 300-400 wines on a bottle menu. But we do 80 to 100 by the glass.
What does that mean, 80 to 100?
So we do between 80 and 100 different wines by the glass.
Oh, really?
So you can either buy it by the bottle or buy it by the glass.
Now, I don't know a lot about this, but my guess is that's a pretty substantial assortment.
It is. As an independent, it's one of the largest in the Northeast area.
Really? Wow. Well, now, I had the opportunity to sit down and we talked a little bit before at Ballou's, and when we talked about wines, you mentioned the 5 S's.
Sure.
So I was wondering if you could elaborate on that for our audience and talk a little bit about the 5 S's and what they mean in terms of wine and wine tasting.
Absolutely. The 5 S's are pretty essential. And as humans, we do it automatically. We just don't think about it. So if we look at the first S, that's swirl. So if you have my imaginary wine glass and we're going to swirl the wine.
I see it right there, Steve. Yes, it looks good.
So while we're swirling it, we're opening up that wine. We're letting that bouquet, we're letting that nose of the wine open up. So once we swirl and we have it opened up, what do we want to do? Well, second S is sniff. So we want to smell the wine. And Ed, you know, a fascinating thing about wine is when you have your glass, and if you think about taking your glass and breaking it up into 4 different quadrants, you can actually pick up a different bouquet in each area. It's pretty amazing.
In each area?
In each area.
There's 4 different bouquets?
Exactly.
Bouquet meaning smell.
Meaning smell, the nose of the wine. And the reason is because the way our senses work and the way our faculties work, as we pick it up and we're breathing it in, it hits different areas of the taste buds. Okay, and that's really how you smell it. That's why sometimes you see somebody on television swirl it and then they stick the whole nose in it, almost as if their face is buried into it, and they're really trying to get that bouquet from there. So, in the essence of time, so now I've swirled, I've sniffed. Now I am going to sip my wine. Okay, so I sip, and one really important fact is when you sniff your wine, you want to make sure that, when you sip your wine, you take 2 sips.
2?
2. What? The reason why is your first sip is what we call a cleansing sip. So that cleansing sip, what that does is it allows your taste buds to get over the shock. So it's kind of like, remember you buy a bottle of wine, you open it up and you pour it and you take a sip and you're like, woof, I don't know, did I make a bad decision on this bottle?
Interesting.
And then you take that second sip and you're like, oh, no, it's okay.
Okay, I've never heard it described as shock, but it's a good description.
Sure. I mean, if you think about it, all of a sudden you're pouring this, fermented fruit over your taste buds there, and they get a little shaky. So that's why we always say take, the first sip is a cleansing, the second one will actually give you a better idea of the wine itself. Mm-hmm. So now I'm doing this without cards, okay? So I need to think a minute. So we swirled, we sniffed, we sipped.
Right.
Now we have to savor. So now we want to let that wine really work in our mouth, okay? And we want to really get that taste of it. So we savor it and we splash it around a little bit, okay? Now, the last step gets a little funny, okay? Traditionally, the last step is to spit.
Spit?
Spit. Because if you're doing a wine tasting, you don't want to confuse your taste buds. You want to spit it out so you don't overload your taste buds.
Okay.
But we never do that at Ballous.
Okay.
We always swallow.
I've been to Ballous. I've never seen people spitting.
No, absolutely not. Even during our wine presentations. So it's just a fun way. And the whole reason about us doing Ballous and bringing wine to the community, especially in the way we do it, we wanted to take the pretentiousness away. When people think of wine, they get nervous. They get a little, taken back. Am I going to be able to pronounce it? Do I know enough about it?
Sure.
Wine is supposed to be fun. Mm-hmm. That's why we also take the time when we pair our wines with our food.
What do you mean when you say pair your wines to the food?
A lot of places will make a wine list or bring in wines, and they pair their they pair their food to their wine. What we do is we take our wines and we find what we're developing goes well with the wine. Mm-hmm. So for instance, if we were going to have, let's say, if you're going to have capers, mm-hmm. Pasta with capers, sun-dried tomatoes, a little bit of olive oil and garlic, mm-hmm. okay? We might recommend a Pinot Grigio. Now, Pinot Grigio white wine, it's actually our #1 selling white wine at Ballous. Why do you think Pinot Grigio?
I don't know. I'm anxious to hear the answer.
Well, every wine list has a Pinot Grigio on it. And we have been so committed as a community and a culture, if we drink white wine, we're going to what we know, Pinot Grigio. Mm-hmm. We actually have around 20 different varietals of white wine at Ballous. So we would probably recommend maybe a Sauvignon Blanc or even a Falanghina from Italy, which is a nice dry white wine. Mm-hmm. Wine is just so much fun.
Is it really important what wine you drink with the food? Does it make a big difference?
Oh, it makes a huge difference. But the difference is you need to drink what you like.
Okay.
That's what, to me, makes the big difference. We're not about red with meat, white with fish. I mean, that was a time ago. You know, now it's drink what you like, experience it.
So that's more important. I mean,
I feel it.
I mean, I've had dinner parties, and I've often wondered, I said, okay, we're having this. What wine do I serve with it? You're saying there is a certain protocol, but at the end of the day, it's what really you like and what makes sense for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. And you talked, I found it interesting that you described that, and when we talked before, you said that drinking wine is fun. What makes it fun?
Well, what makes it fun is what we make of it. I mean, drinking wine, you know, we say we have, pardon the phrase, happy drunks, okay? It's a quick buzz and a quick down on it, you know? It's a beverage that you can sit there and sip and have a good time and just chat and have fun and catch up with people. A lot of people don't realize is Ballou's on the weekend, on the weeknights, were probably about 60% women.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It,
A lot of birthday parties, get-togethers, celebrations, book clubs. It's just a place to come and relax, enjoy, and find good wine.
now, is there? That's an interesting statistic.
It is.
Is there? Can we extrapolate anything from the demographic of 60% women to wine?
Sure. I think part of it, it's a safe place.
Oh, okay.
So it's unlike your typical bar where you walk in and there's a huge bar and there's all these people at the bar drinking beer and this and that. Not that wine is any better than beer.
Sure.
It's just a different environment. You know, it's cozy, it's close, it's a protected kind of atmosphere, per se. And women really seem to embrace it. I've noticed now that we're going into our 7th season, some of the women are even telling their husbands. Because on the weekends, we see a lot more couples and things coming in. And when I go around the dining room, I'll ask, how was everything? And, have you been here before? And it's so funny because the wife looks and says, or the woman, oh, I'm here all the time. I love Ballou's. And the husband is, it's my 2nd time. And I'm like, oh, so you let him come in.
That's
so
great. That's what a great story.
Yeah, it's kind of unique within itself.
So I've heard wines described as New World versus Old World. I'm not sure what that means. So could educate all of us on that?
Sure. It's a great example. When we talk Old World wines, great examples are Italy, Chianti. Remember when we'll date ourselves, Ed, when we were younger, growing up, and we used to be able to drink at 18?
I have vague recollections of that, Steve.
Well, remember the Chianti bottles? They were a glass bottle with a long neck with the grass on the bottom.
I remember them well, yes.
And we used to drink that, and we used to say, oh, God, who could drink this stuff? Well, wine's changed over time. A Chianti, essentially, is from the Chianti area of Italy, much like Champagne is from France. Those are called Old World regional wines. New World, we go by varietals that we're familiar with in the United States, like Cabernet Sauvignon, Pinot Grigio, Merlot, Malbecs, things of that nature. That's what your New World is. So South Africa, Australia, United States, Argentina, Chile, they're all New World. And the surprising thing that we're finding in the wine industry as of late is the Old World places such as France are starting to do New World signatures.
What does that mean?
Well, they're starting to go to the varietal end of it, where they're bringing in, instead of Chianti, they might call it Sangiovese, because Sangiovese is one of the main grapes in there. Before, everything was regional. Now, I think as the world is educated and more people are drinking wine than ever, When you look at a Burgundy or a Chianti, people are a little confused about what that means. They can relate to it better if they see a varietal like Merlot or Cabernet Sauvignon and so forth. Now, the surprising thing, what a lot of people don't know is most of our wines are blended. In fact, we're seeing a lot more blended wines. And blended means you're using more than one style grape in a wine.
Is this a new phenomenon?
It's not a new, but it's an up and coming. There's been blended grapes for years. In fact, Old World would call it table wine.
Okay.
So it was a mixture of different wines from different areas that they have left that they would combine. Some call it a cuvée, some call it a table wine. And now what you're seeing is a lot of different varietals being mixed, like a Cab Merlot or a Shiraz Merlot style. Greg Norman puts out a great Cab Shiraz blended wine. Now, when you think, okay, well, what's blended and what's something like a Cabernet Sauvignon? Well, in the United States, you need to be 80% of that grape varietal to be called a Merlot or a Cab or a Cab Franc. A lot of winemakers will use different wines in that particular wine as long as there's 80% in. So they'll use a grape that's called Tannat or Carmenere. And those are grapes that they mix in to get a particular flavor of the wine, although it's still 80% or better Merlot, so you can call it a Merlot, but it's mixed with other grapes. Blending takes it a different step. Blending is usually a mixture of like 60-40, it could be 70-20-10, things like that that change the wine and the varietal. A fun one is ménage à trois, okay?
This is a wine question we're talking about now?
We're still on wine.
Okay, I want to make sure we're in the same interview.
But we have at Ballou's, we call them wine flights. And it's 3 3-ounce pours of wine. And you can choose any 3 wines on our menu. The fun thing about this is that you can really experience the differences in the wine tastes from the different areas. Maybe it's Napa Valley, maybe it's Chile or Argentine. Where they're grown, the grapes are grown or sourced, makes a difference in really the end result of your wine taste as well. So we have one that's called Sexy Flight.
Really?
And in that we have promiscuous, monogamy, and ménage à trois.
There's no theme here at all.
No real theme to it, but when you think of ménage à trois, we think of usually